Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. I'm Spencer Simpson.
And I'm Kelton Howell. As always, thank you so much for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our weekly Commander content. This week, we have a fun topic. We have been playing with a lot of newer players recently, and we had quite a few games with new players this week. And those games do move a little bit slower, but what's really fun about it is that you get to see those new players have those aha moments where they're like, oh, that's what that card does, or oh, those two cards work together really well. And that's really fun for us. That's one of the things we really love about Commander.
Yeah, that's some of my favorite moments, like in Commander in general, but also teaching newer players, is when they get to see a cool mechanic or synergy and figure out what they like about the game in general. Because I do think it's hard to know, if you haven't played very much, like what you think is cool, and you get to discover those things. And like Kelton said, we got to play this week a little bit. We've been trying to play more frequently. And that always gets the juices flowing, really, for like episode ideas. And this week, like, we played with a fair amount of newer players, and so it inspired this week's episode idea, which is to kind of help recreate some of those aha moments for some of you, and talk about some cards that probably, and effects that probably play better than you think they do.
Yeah, and that's because a lot of play patterns in Commander aren't necessarily very intuitive. If you just learn the basics of the game, you know, you lose when you get to 0 life. You want to have things on board, and you don't want your opponents to have things on board. When you're thinking about it through that lens, all of a sudden cards, you're like, oh, that card makes me lose life. That doesn't sound very good. Or, oh, feels like it's helping my opponent. Why would I play this card? And those things aren't very intuitive. So this is for all those newer players out there, or friends of newer players. These are the cards that really you need to take a second look at, and you can start to understand why they're played so frequently in Commander.
Yeah, for sure. And these cards, we should preface, are not like new discoveries by us. These are cards that you'll see a lot playing.
We found these in the depths of Scryfall, and they're played in 0% of decks on EDHREC.
Yeah, I think we just scrolled through like the top 100 cards in EDHREC, right? And
sure, maybe it was actually honestly probably like the top 1,000. We did dive pretty deep on EDHREC, but we picked out the cards, and we also asked a lot of our friends, hey, what cards did not seem very good when you started playing, but you now understand why they are played in Commander and why they're played frequently, why you see them all the time.
Yeah. So we just wanted to talk about some of those and help explain why some of those cards are played frequently, or why those effects are so good and why you should be taking advantage of them. Starting with cards that make you pay life as a resource.
Yeah, I used this as an example when we were just introducing the topic, and I think that's because this is probably one of the biggest ones, and it's usually the first one that a player runs into, where naturally new players want to stay as far away from 0 as possible, because that's how you lose the game. Right.
Yeah, and I don't know if a lot of players' introduction to Magic is through standard or like a 2-player format where your life total is 20. Yeah. But that was where I started, and 20 is much closer to 0 than 40 is. But especially in that format, you want to stay really as far away from possible for the most part from 0. And sometimes that's like super appropriate in Commander as well. But we do have 40 starting life, which makes it a really abundant resource to be able to take advantage of.
Yeah, that's actually, you brought up a really interesting point while we were talking about this concept, and that's that not only do you have 40 life, but all players at the table have 40 life. So from your perspective, you're fighting against 120 life, but the reverse is also true, where you're just part of the 120 life that your opponents are having to chip down. And so they're probably not looking at you and being like, oh yeah, keep draining your life. You know, like that one damage is just a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, and I think as a result, not only is your life total higher, right, that you have 40 life, but it also goes down more slowly because each player has to spread their damage. Now, you do have 3 opponents as well, right? Yeah. But each player has to spread their damage out evenly across 120 life. Now, better players will know when you are leveraging your life as a resource and pressure your life total accordingly.
Sure.
But but in more casual pods, that doesn't happen very often. Like, people are kind of
No.
spreading the love pretty frequently.
Yeah, we talked about that in one of our other episodes. That's a friendly play, not an optimal play, but it's something
Right.
you see a lot at commander tables.
Yeah. At higher power commander tables, you will probably see that more happening more often. But I think we should probably clarify like what we mean by using your life as a resource. And I think starting with probably the all-time best example is a good way to show this, and that is,
you have never seen in a game of Commander.
You've never seen this in a game of Commander because it is currently banned, and it is because that's how good it is. It is Channel. Channel is 1 green for a sorcery, and it says...
it's just green, man.
Oh, sorry, just green.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so sorry. It is green.
Which is way better.
Yep, it is green for a sorcery that says, until end of turn, anytime you could activate a mana ability, you may pay 1 life. If you do, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Which, we're going to simplify that and just say, pay a life, get a mana. Which is very, very powerful.
That's a great rate. I mean, you would take this on any card. I would love it if they like made a less broken version of this card. In Modern Horizons 3, they made like Chthonian Nightmare, which is the less broken recurring nightmare, and the one that's Gilded Drake. Did they make a They didn't make a channel.
They didn't make a channel version. It probably would have had to have been Energy, because they did make some other
Volatile
versions.
Storm Drake or whatever the
that's like a Gilded Drake,
one.
and then there was like not Abundance, but the one that lets you put 2 creatures out with mana value 3 or less.
Birthing, no. 2 creatures out with mana value.
I'd have to look it up. I can't remember that one. It was less popular, but it was like a less broken effect. Although I will say they have made Channel into a different card through Lord of the Forsaken.
Oh, that's right. You were telling me that this is the black channel.
This is the black channel for graveyards.
Specifically for graveyards. So way more narrow, but
way
it does
more narrow.
Kind of typically, it kind of technically has the same effect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is the only card I can think of that does something similar that is not banned.
Sure. Yeah. But anyways, there's a reason this is banned. It's so good. Paying life to generate mana. There's a reason that this is banned, and there's a reason it hasn't really been reprinted.
Yeah. The closest effect we have to this, I joke about Lord of the Forsaken, but actually the closest effect we have to this in Commander that you will see played pretty frequently is Bolas's Citadel. Do you want to hear Bolas's Citadel?
Yeah, this is 3 black, so 3 black pips. For a legendary artifact, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. And if you cast a spell this way, you pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than paying its mana cost. It also has the activated ability tap, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, and each opponent loses 10 life. This is very good, and often, especially at higher power tables, will just like kind of end the game on the spot, right?
Yeah, in CEDH, people run like significantly fewer lands. And so the thing that really stops you with Bolas's Citadel is, oh no, I have a land on top of my library. Yeah. But other than that, it's like Channel on an artifact, right?
Yeah, it
that
kind of
pays
is.
for colored pips.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing. There's a reason this card is played so much. And it used to be, it's kind of a little more expensive now. It used to be very expensive. And then when they did the LGS promo, it got down to like $2 or something like that. And
it's shooting back up.
That one's back up to $5. So if you don't have one of these yet, it's a good time to pick one up. Very, very explosive. I mean, especially if you have a way to play lands off the top of your deck, extra lands, or
shuffle your library
to clear them out, then Bolas's Citadel just has such an impact, usually on the turn that you play it.
Yeah, for sure. And to tie that back into why is this not particularly intuitive, right? Like a newer player, or even some experienced players, probably not though, typically newer players that are trying to understand why this is good, right, would be like, I don't want to lose life to cast these spells. And that makes sense, right? Because you just see your life total going down and down and down. But if you have had the opportunity to play this card, you understand why that's not a bad thing when you are playing
so far ahead of
5, 6, 7 spells, right, off of the top.
It's really intimidating when you're like, okay, there's a 4-mana creature. I play it. Okay, there goes a 10th of my starting life. And then it's like, oh no, this is a 6-mana thing. I guess I play it, and then there goes 6 of your life. You've just lost 10 life that turn. So it can be very intimidating, and it's one of the things that once you play it and once you see how far ahead you get by doing that, you understand that it's usually a pretty good trade-off.
Yeah. Yeah, life for mana is very, very good.
What about life for cards?
Life for cards, also very, very good. We have a couple examples here. The first one being that we don't talk about very much anymore is Phyrexian Arena.
Yeah,
or we do talk about, but we're not as hot on, which I think we should be.
Yeah, so Phyrexian Arena has been around for a while now, and it was kind of the go-to black card draw engine staple. So it's 1 black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. But over time, there have been a lot of other black card draw engines that have made this look a little less special or significant. And so we've been down on it a little. I think it's still very good. I still think a lot of black decks want this card.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. I will not lie to you. I just was looking at the card. We should probably read it, and I got distracted reading the flavor text on this one because I got really confused about the art of it.
I did read it while you were going on the flavor text.
Oh, you did. I'm so sorry. I totally
Wait, read the flavor text. So that is this from the new printing?
My heartstrings, yes. So from the All Will Be One printing, it is, for a bittersweet moment, Jace believed he could still save his love. A moment was all Vraska needed for the glory of Phyrexia, she whispered. And then it's her like cutting his, or completing him, or cutting his throat or whatever. Anyway,
yeah,
I'm so sorry.
It is epic art though.
That is really good art. Adding that context to the art makes it very, very intense. Yeah. Okay, I'm so sorry. Yes, very, very powerful effect. But it's easy for newer players to think, well, I don't want to lose 1 life, right, to draw a card. And we're going to read some more examples here that
1 life per card is so good.
And these will feel worse and worse and worse, but they're also actually maybe not like each one's more powerful, but also some very powerful effects to let you draw cards. And the next one here is black market connections. How about some life for cards and mana?
Go ahead and read this one for us.
Yeah, black market connections is 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more. So you do have to choose 1 at least, but you could choose any number of them. Create a treasure token, you lose 1 life. Draw a card, you lose 2 life. Create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling, you lose 3 life. And as a reminder, Changeling means it has every creature type.
Yeah, so thank goodness this recently got reprinted and really helped with the monetary value of this card.
Yeah, twice.
Twice. This is just quite a bit better than Phyrexian Arena, right?
I think so. I mean, it's 1 less black pip, so it's easier to play. You get to ramp and draw a card for 3 life total, and create a creature if you want it. This goes in almost every single one of my decks that plays black.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, it's just over the course of the game such a value engine. But again, it reads. It's worth the. Yeah, it doesn't read. It doesn't read great if you don't know how powerful that effect is.
Yes, right. I lose 3 life a turn, and I create just 1 mana, and I draw a card. Let's put this into perspective, though. The 1 mana, first of all, is in the form of a treasure, which is objectively better than just mana in your mana pool, because it's an artifact. You can save it up for later. You can.
It's any color.
It's any color. It's phenomenal. And drawing an additional card puts 1 more card in your hand each turn. We already talked about that being great with Phyrexian Arena, right?
Yep.
Paying 1 more life to do that, I would gladly pay 2 life for an additional card in my hand.
How often do you pay the full 6 life?
It depends on the deck pretty heavily. I would say actually almost never. Unless I care about. So in my Will Help the Rock Cleaver deck, it's a zombie. So I pay 6 life.
All the time, right?
Almost all the time. Yep. In a deck that I don't care about having creatures, pretty much never, and I just am drawing cards and creating treasures.
That's kind of where I'm at too. There are some decks where it is the full 6 every time, and there have been games where I've died to this effect.
For sure.
I mean, where I
over
have
3 turns, that's almost half of your life.
That's 18 life over 3 turns. But it does give you so much potential for winning the game that I think oftentimes it's very worth it.
Yeah, and Wilhelt, right? If I full send in a turn, if Wilhelt's on the battlefield, I draw a card for turn, draw a card from Black Market Connections, draw a card from Wilhelt, get a 2/2 Decayed Zombie, right?
Yeah.
So it's 3 cards a turn and a treasure if I do the full send.
Yeah, that's quite good. With nothing else needed.
With this one card being on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's really powerful. So our next example, you might see a pattern here, is Ripples of Undeath.
Yeah. You may notice a bit of a pattern here. The first one made us lose 1 life for a card. The last one made us lose 2 life for a card. And then this is Ripples of Undeath. 1 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you mill 3 cards. Then you may pay 1 mana and 3 life. And if you do, you put a card from among those cards into your hand.
Yes. So this is actually specifically the card that one of the newer players, they discarded early in the game.
From your game.
From our game. We played a game. They discarded this early in the game. And I was like, oh, that's really, really good. You should probably play that. And they're like, well, it makes me lose 3 life. I want to explain why this one is especially good in this list of cards. Yep. In specific decks that care about having stuff in your graveyard, this is obviously very phenomenal.
Yeah, it just fills your graveyard pretty quickly. 3 cards a turn is a lot. I mean, we play Stitcher Supplier in graveyard decks to try and get stuff into the graveyard.
Right.
This is that every turn.
Every turn. And you don't have to pay the life, so you can just keep putting stuff in your graveyard, right?
Yeah.
But you get to draw a card for turn, and then you get to see 3 additional cards, which is...
so that's 4 cards.
4 cards. And you get to choose from among... You don't get to put all 3 of those in your hand, but you get to choose from among those 3, which is still very, very good.
Is this... Okay. This is a very weird analogy, maybe. Is this kind of Brainstorm? It costs you 1 mana to draw a card out of 3. Except it's better that they go into your graveyard than back on top of your deck.
Yeah, it's probably better Brainstorm every turn.
It might be.
What is... is there anything that does that? Look at the top 3.
Underrealm
put 1
Lich
into your hand, 2 into your graveyard. I'm going to Google that really quick. Underrealm Lich. Yeah, Underrealm Lich does that.
Which is so good. It's a busted card.
And notably, all of these go into your graveyard first. So anything that cares about, you don't...
Going into your graveyard.
Yeah, exactly, which is really, really good as well.
Also, you don't draw cards. So that's bad in some cases for you, but good if, an opponent... Or, against Shieldred, right?
Against Shieldred specifically,
you would lose life.
Very, very good. I've had that type of effect save me against your Shieldred deck before.
Yes, you
where
have.
You're not technically
put
drawing
cards
a card
into your hand.
Exactly. And to keep up with this trend, some people have called Ripples of Undeath baby Sylvan Library, so that's what I want to talk about next.
I've heard it called Milvan Library.
That's really good.
That's pretty good.
I mean, it is, right? And it's better than Sylvan Library in, I think, a lot of cases because you're clearing stuff off the top, right? Sylvan Library, you have to either pay the life...
You do have to pay a mana.
You have to pay a mana. Yeah, so I would say, I don't think it's better than Sylvan Library, but I think it's relatively comparable.
It's pretty good. Yeah, so Sylvan Library is 1 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do, you choose 2 cards in your hand drawn this turn, and then for each of those cards, you either pay 4 life or put the card on top of your library. So, draw 1 for turn, 2 additional for Sylvan Library, and then you can keep 1 for free, and then you can keep the other 2 if you pay 4 life for each of them, or you put them back on top of your library.
Okay, so I take it back. Sylvan Library is way better than Ripples of Undeath.
Yeah.
Because often, especially in higher power games, now in lower power games, this is less good for the most part, but still very good, I will pay 8 life. Especially if I need to clear stuff off the top of my library. Because drawing 2 additional cards a turn is really good. It
is good. And you almost never want to put something back. Because in a lower power game, you may say, oh, this card's not that good. I don't want it. I'm going to put it back. Well, now it's stuck on top of your library unless you have a way to shuffle. And so in higher power, if you don't have a way to shuffle, you're just paying the 4 life because you don't want
just clearing stuff off the top.
Yeah.
And if it's good, you're like, well, I want that in my hand.
Sure.
And this other card in my hand, potentially. So you're paying the life to keep them.
Cool combo with Bolas' Citadel, so you can put back the cards you can cast off of Bolas' Citadel.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, these are some really good examples of card draw staples, really, that you will see in decks. All of which are in black and green currently. Because
there are other ones, but mostly just black and green.
Yeah, going to make you be paying life. But I think it's important to go through a little thought example of why we would do this, right? Like, why would you pay 3 or 4 life for a card with, like, Sylvan Librars, Ripples of a Death? Because it's just very good. And then you can use your mana for things that are actually spells, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of free, right?
Yeah,
your life
exactly.
is just another resource. And that is one way that you really need to think if you're newer to Magic, you need to think of your life as a resource, not a lose condition.
Yeah.
You have mana, you have life. You know, if you're playing an energy deck, you have energy. These are all just resources that you can use. And it's something that I actually think Limited helps out a lot with. So I really enjoy playing control decks in Limited.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a very difficult transition to go from to feel comfortable going down in life and then stabilizing and then coming back and winning, which is how a lot of control decks end up playing. Is you get down to 5, 4, 3 life, and then you're able to stop their game plan and kind of put the brakes on and then win from there. And you kind of have to learn not to get too worried about that and to not start to freak out or tilt once your life total is really low. But it's a good Limited has really helped me develop that muscle for understanding that my life is just a resource. And as long as I don't lose, I'm spend the life,
Yeah, I mean, in that context, you're using life as a resource to keep your creatures on board, right?
Yeah, for time. It buys you time in a game.
Yeah, and you might like try to be building up a board state that's big enough to block, right? A bigger creature or whatever that's trying to hit you or anything like that. It's just, it is a resource, and in Commander, it is your most abundant resource. You can only play 1 land per turn, and you can only use your mana to cast spells, and it doesn't have to be just from those lands, but that's how you generate the majority of your mana through the course of a game is through your lands that you're playing. And so if you can use any other resource to draw cards or generate other advantages, then you should be jumping at that for the most part.
Do you think how close to 40 mana do you think you spend in a game? In a typical game of Commander? Just out of curiosity. This isn't
so
scripted,
a game of Commander probably goes. I mean, it's probably some sort of like factorial algebra, right?
Yeah, it's like because if it goes, let's say it goes, you have 9 land drops in a game. It's 9 + 8 + 7 + 6 + 5.
Yeah, right. It's like 10 factorial minus 3
factorial
factorial because you probably are skipping some mana some turns, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's probably close to 40.
Yeah, it's probably close. I mean, 10 factorial is way more than 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's sweet. And it's always there.
Yeah. And so, again, I think a good thought experiment for this is to think about, like, the inverse of this, right? Which is, okay, I guess let's just use, like, a real example. So you have a big old creature on board. Let's say Toxrill the Corrosive, one of the biggest, scariest creatures, right?
One of the worst creatures.
Should we read Toxrill just to give you some context of how scary Toxrill
it is? Yeah.
Yes, Toxrill the Corrosive.
Why don't you read it, and then I'll take care of it.
Okay, great. Toxrill the Corrosive is 5 black for a 7/7 legendary creature slug horror. At the beginning of your end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token, pay a blue and a black, sacrifice a slug, draw a card. And I'm going to reiterate that the first one said at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature.
Yeah, so it's like kind of board wipes by the time it gets back to your turn.
Yeah.
One-sided board wipe.
Most often, one-sided board wipe that makes you stuff.
So this is the card that I hope to have in my hand when you play Toxrill the Corrosive, and that's Swords to Plowshares. It's 1 white mana for an instant, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. So you might be saying, oh man, but Spencer's going to gain 7 life if I get rid of his Toxrill. That is such a good deal.
Right. From your perspective, that is such a good deal. And from my perspective, as who has the big old creature, if I gain 7 life, I think the thought experiment everyone should be asking themselves right now is, would I pay 7 life to get my creature back? Your
Absolutely.
Your answer should be absolutely yes every time. I will do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in this instance, you're paying life for mana, right? You're paying life to have that creature on board to not have to use your mana as a resource and have some board state. But I think it's also true for like card draw. Would you put a card from your hand on top of your library to gain 4 life? Maybe. What about 3 life? 2 or 1, right? You can move down.
Probably not.
Probably not, right? And so why would you not pay a life or 2 or 3 or 4 to take a card off the top of your library and put it into your hand and have it to be used without having to spend any mana?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great thought experiment. Probably the last place that this comes up pretty frequently with some of the newer players that we see is in lands, shock lands, or the new MDFCs from Modern Horizons 3 that deal 3 damage to enter untapped. A shock land is a land that taps for 2 different kinds of mana. It has 2 different land types on it, and it enters the battlefield tapped unless you pay 2 life. So that 2 life to fix your mana and allow you access to that mana on the turn that you play it is generally very good. Unless you don't have anything to do with that mana, just let it enter tapped. But generally, you're super happy to pay that 2 life just to be able to get access to that mana.
Oh, for sure. And then the fetch lands pair exceptionally well with those, right? They are lands that they don't tap for any mana themselves, but you pay a life, you tap, you sacrifice it, and then you get to search for a land with
one of 2 basic land types.
One of 2 basic land types, right.
Yeah.
So with the shock lands that do have basic land types, you're paying 3 mana with a fetch land, we'll do Scalding Tarn. It is blue and red. With blue and red, you can actually search for, in a 5-color deck, we'll say we're in a 5-color deck trying to fix all of our colors, you can get any 2 combination of colors with blue or red, which is incredible fixing, right? Because
is that 7 or 8 cards? Like 7 or 8 different lands? Is it 7 different lands?
I think it's 7 different lands. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that just fixes your color so well. And all in all, it's cost you 3 life, which is amazing.
Right. And so and it lets you cast the spells that you're wanting to cast on curve, which is really, really good. So we're going to close this one out. We're going to move on to our next topic. But we're both, I think, very, very passionate about this, that newer players, and this is something that newer players need to learn if they want to improve the game, which is paying life for these type of effects is very good because it means you can use your mana for other things. And I think that is our thesis that we're going to be presenting about this section.
Sure. So when you see these in decks, in precons, in the decks that you're playing against, you can understand why they're played and what makes them
in your hand in a game.
Yeah.
You can think, oh, this is good that I have this. I will play it.
Yep. Well, our next section is cards that have less of a downside than you think. So very similarly how paying life looks like a downside on a card, these are other cards or effects that seem to have a downside, but that downside isn't all that bad.
Yeah, sometimes it can be hard to tell if it's worth it, like with paying life. And the first ones we can start with are things that give your opponents stuff. And actually, this is very timely because we're doing this
I was going to say that.
Just prior to the release of Bloomburrow.
Yeah, Bloomburrow has a very special and unique mechanic called gifting, where when you play a card, you can gift another player something. It's like a fish token or a card or something like that, and it gives you an additional benefit when you cast that spell. So.
Yes, and some of those will be very hard to weigh, right? And some of those, it's like destroy a small creature, but if you give your opponent a card, destroy a big creature. Yeah. And sometimes you don't maybe want to give your opponent a card, and so it's hard, but the creature may be big enough. In any case, a really good example of why these trade-offs are often worth it, because it gives you the option to do both. Now, these cards we're going to be talking about don't give you the option, but are just very, very good. You'll see them in a lot of decks, and hopefully we can help you understand why they're so good.
Yeah, the first one on the list is Beast Within. So this is 2 and a green for an instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green beast creature token. So this is a 3-mana removal spell, which, when you compare that to Swords to Plowshares that we just talked about, feels pretty bad. And then it can destroy any permanent, which is amazing in green. We just don't get that many effects in green that allow you to do this. But it does give them a 3/3, and that can feel really bad.
Yes. Except that it's not. Except that it's very good. I think the only time, almost the only time you shouldn't cast this is when an opponent has a vanilla 3/3 creature or smaller. Every other
You're
time,
just upgrading them like a strict upgrade.
Right.
When was the last time you saw a vanilla 2/2 in Commander that was causing you a big enough problem that you had to give them a 3/3?
Token or whatever? I don't know. Right. But every other situation, this is like purely an upgrade. You're taking To Kelsey's point, when's the last time you saw a vanilla creature? Everything's got crazy abilities these days. Why not give them something that doesn't have any abilities and is small?
Yeah, and even if you are removing a creature that's smaller than 3/3, you're likely removing it because it has an ability that's problematic, right?
Yes.
And that's the reason you're removing it. And so now that they have this vanilla 3/3 with no abilities, it's not a problem anymore.
And more importantly, you're probably not hitting a creature. You're probably hitting a very relevant artifact or enchantment or planeswalker or a land if it's really problematic. Or a Toxrill the Corrosive for a vanilla 3/3.
I save all of my removal for Toxrill.
I know. This is maybe something we should talk about, and maybe it's this is maybe a future episode idea. But salty cards we don't play anymore. I'm debating not playing Toxrill as much because Toxrill does feel really bad. Like,
I mean, it does feel pretty bad.
People hate it. In one of our games, we had 3 Toxrill the Corrosives because someone took it out of my graveyard, someone copied it, and then I killed them both and got it again. Right?
Yeah,
like
that's crazy.
It can get kind of out of control. In any case, trading a Toxrill the Corrosive for a 3/3 beast is
such
a very, very good upgrade for you. Yes, every time. Not for the player who controls Toxrill, but for you who is trying to remove it. And I guess another card that does this exact same thing in white is Generous Gift. Generous Gift is 2 and a white for an instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. So we're switching a beast for an elephant, but the exact same effect, just in white.
Yeah, and you did mention there is kind of a better version of this now with Stroke of Midnight. It's the same cost. It's an instant. Destroy target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 1/1 white human creature token. So the only difference is that Stroke of Midnight can't hit lands, but it's usually less of a problem. You're usually not hitting lands with Generous Gift. You can't.
Yeah, I don't
They have
play...
a Gaia's Cradle that's going crazy, but
or a Field of the Dead or whatever. I don't play. Sure. I don't play anything that specifically targets lands, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on something that doesn't hit lands to create a smaller creature. And then the last one here, which I'm trying to do some comparisons, is Resculpt, which is 1 and a blue for an instant. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So again, a bigger creature, right? But this is an exile effect. It can hit artifacts or creatures. It's only 2 mana. Very, very worth it to get rid of something that's scary to just have someone get a 4/4. Now that's a relevant body, but you're not gonna. A 4/4 takes them 10 turns to kill you, and another 20 turns to kill everyone else. So don't be so worried about it.
Yeah, and you can also think about it like if they attack you back with a 4/4, you lose 4 life. So it's like if the card read, exile an artifact or creature, you lose 4 life. You would always play that. That's amazing.
I would play Snuff Out.
Yep.
Let's read Snuff Out because that's exactly what it is. Snuff Out is 3 and a black for an instant. If you control a swamp, you may pay 4 life rather than pay Snuff Out's mana cost. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated. Now that's free, which is better than 2 mana.
Sure.
But I would play this any day.
I mean, this just goes back to our previous example where if you can pay life rather than mana, you should probably just pay the life.
Yeah, exactly. But the same thing with Resculpt. Like, a lot of the subprime effects that remove things are like, 4, 5 mana, and you're saving 2 or 3 mana here to just maybe take a hit, and that's not so bad.
Totally, exactly. So this group of cards were ones that give your opponent something in place of the creature or permanent that you removed. And while that might read on the card at first like it's not very good that you're giving them back this big 4/4 creature, in reality, that creature is much less problematic than whatever it is that you removed.
Agreed. Very, very, very true. We have some other ones here that we'll just quickly run through. Basically the same effects, or similar effects, I guess. One being Chaos Warp, which we talked about not playing enough in our red decks.
Yeah, this is one that I'm so on the fence about. I know it's good. I don't like playing it, but I know it's good. So it's 2 and a red for an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield.
Yes.
It's most of the time not bad.
Yeah, this hits way less frequently than you think it does.
Yeah.
And if it does, it's probably a land, right?
Yeah. This is also better in certain matchups. If you're playing against a Spellslinger deck, this is great against a Spellslinger deck. It's a lot worse against an Atlaplani deck.
Yes. Oh, yes, for sure.
Yeah. So you do need to be a little responsible wielding this sword, but in general, it is going to be better than you think. Like the downside is just much less of a downside than you imagine it to be. Every once in a while, they're going to hit Natali off of it. And that's okay. And that happens. But everyone will laugh. And those are those moments that you play Commander for anyway. So it's totally fine.
Yeah. Chaos Warp, I should play it way more because it is just fun. But it is, when you're like trying to win, like, I mean, every game you're trying to win. And so when you're like, well, I think this can win me the game, but we'll see if they hit a Massacre Girl or whatever, then it feels less good. One that does feel especially good and is one of our pet cards of the channel we've talked about several times is Baleful Mastery, which is 3 and a black for an instant. You may pay 1 and a black rather than cast this spell's mana cost. If the 1 and a black cost was paid, an opponent draws a card. So this is kind of like gifting. This is kind of like if you give the opponent a card, it costs 2 less, and the effect is exile target creature or planeswalker.
Oh, that's so good.
So good, especially in black. Oh, so good.
Yeah, it's very good.
And again, the best part about this is you don't have to choose the opponent whose thing you're removing.
We do mention that every time we talk about this card, but it's because that's actually quite good.
It's so
Just
good.
Give it to the player in last place. You know?
So good, and it's so funny. Even when it happens to me, I think it's so funny.
Love it.
Okay, so I think it kind of wraps up things for this category. Giving opponents stuff, as evidenced by the Bloomborough gift mechanic, is not always bad. There are instances where it is, like some of the other Strixhaven Masteries that are significantly worse than Baleful Mastery.
Yeah, Baleful Mastery is the best one.
Yeah, but these are all examples of when it's not so bad to give your opponent something for a specific effect, like getting rid of their Toxtrol the Corrosive, which we will continue saying is the worst creature ever to exist.
It's not. It just does games.
It's close. It's pretty close to the meanest creature to ever live.
Our next category is stuff that puts things in your graveyard and stuff that gets stuff out of your graveyard. So using your graveyard, like we use life as an additional resource, using your graveyard as an extension of your hand.
Yes, we didn't mention this when we were talking about Chaos Warp, but one of the good things about Chaos Warp is when you put something into an opponent's library, it is probably the second worst place for it to be. The first being
Exile,
right? Where they can never get it. But then the library is like, they're probably never going to get it again, right? Yep. And so you need to think about it the same way with your library. The second worst place for your cards to be outside of in exile and uncastable is in your library. So that makes your graveyard obviously a better spot for your cards to be than your library.
Yeah, there's just, I think most cards with the exception, or most colors with the exception of red. Red probably struggles the most to get things out of its graveyard, and then blue. Most colors and most decks are going to have ways to access the graveyard in some way. And then the decks that are in the colors that care about the graveyard, like black and green, wow, it's so useful to have those cards available to you there.
Yes, I am of the opinion that people don't run enough recursion in their decks. It is such a good backup plan. A card that I've been wanting to run, this is relevant to the graveyard discussion, not to the cards that put things in your graveyard. In fact, do we have this? Oh.
Savine's Reclamation?
Yes, this is one we have on our list to talk about, is Savine's Reclamation. I don't play enough white to have this in deck, to play this frequently. But it's such a phenomenal card, and you should be playing it probably in every white deck you play, right?
Maybe. It depends on the creatures that you have. So two and a white, I guess permanents you have. 2 and a white for sorcery. Return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you might be thinking, how do I cast it from a graveyard? You may copy this spell and then may choose a new target for the copy. And that's because it has flashback 4 and a white.
Yes.
So 3 mana, get something small back from your graveyard. 5 mana after that. From your graveyard, get 2 things back. And it's really good. I got hosed pretty hard by this card in a cube draft the other day.
Oh, really? They get something good back out?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I mean, that's rough. The thing is, there are significantly more relevant permanents than you think that are
mana value 3 or less.
Mana value 3 or less. So I had a Verena Lich Queen deck where it was like a zombie combo deck, right? And one of the combos was with Phyrexian Altar. Phyrexian Altar is 3 colorless for an artifact, and you can sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color. And you do that with Gravecrawler, which is a zombie that you can cast from your graveyard. And
you get infinite mana.
You get infinite. You get
or
infinite
ETBs and LTBs.
ETBs and LTBs with Gravecrawler, right? And then you have you have to have a zombie out, and that zombie hopefully is a zombie that can ping people when zombies die or enter, and so you just infinitely loop and kill everybody. I had put in some lands that like would get me permanents back out from my graveyard because Verena also loots, right? When you attack, you draw cards and discard cards. And so you're naturally going to have a lot of cards in your graveyard because you're trying to keep stuff in your hand. I did not have Savine's Reclamation in that list, and I am a dum-dum for not having
Savine's.
Good. It's so
especially
good.
Because you don't have to cast it the first time. You can just discard it.
Pitch it.
And then cast it with flashback from your graveyard. It's great.
Yeah, it's so good. And all of the relevant cards for that combo that are very, very powerful are mana value 3 or less, right? So, and you can cast Gravecrawler from your graveyard. So if I just 4 mana, get both pieces back, and then start casting Gravecrawler,
it's very good.
You're happy with it. And so this is just, I think you'll be surprised, even at lower power tables where you're not trying to combo off, how many of your relevant cards that are very good are mana value 3 or less.
And something else to consider in combination with effects like Savine's Reclamation are cards that get cards into your graveyard.
Yes.
So things like Entomb and Buried Alive. So Entomb is 1 black mana for an instant. You search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So this is a graveyard tutor. It tutors something out of your deck into your graveyard.
Yep, and Buried Alive does the same thing for 2 and a black. It's a sorcery, but you can search your library for up to 3 creature cards and put them into your graveyard.
Yeah, you get all the combo pieces you need right in your graveyard for Savine's Reclamation.
Yep, in a deck that cares about graveyards, this is, hey, go find your 3 best creatures and put them into your hand virtually, right?
Yeah, if you're playing a Graveyard Matters deck. Yep.
Yeah, it is. People get really mad about effects like mill, and I actually read a Reddit post today about that. That was, people would feel significantly less bad about mill if it took the cards from the bottom of your library instead. Right?
This is something that I also think about a lot. I don't mind mill, and it is a perception thing.
Yes.
If they come off the top of your deck, you're like, I would have drawn that next turn. That card is so good. And if it comes off the bottom of your library, you're like, I would have never seen that card in the game.
Yes.
But the issue is your deck is randomized.
Yes.
Unless you've done ordering on your deck, it doesn't matter if it's coming from the top or the bottom. You didn't know that you would have drawn that card. It was completely random.
Right.
Yeah.
And cards in your graveyard are better than cards in your library.
Yeah, so it's great when your opponents mill you. You want to be milled. As long as you're not being milled out and losing the game, it's wonderful to have more cards in your graveyard because, like I said, most of the colors have decent ways to get cards back out of the graveyard.
Yes, and even those that don't, red and blue. Red sometimes does. Red can give scenes flashback, right? But blue has
what
things
about Mizzix's Mastery?
Right, and they have things like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise that are like, sweet, now I got the cards in my graveyard, let me delve them away.
Yeah, it's very
good. This is, okay, our thesis for this section is cards in your graveyard are better than cards in your library. Yep. You should be running more recursion, And don't get mad at people when they mill you because they're doing you a favor by getting those cards out of your library.
Pretend like you're really upset about it so that they think it's a bad thing and they keep milling you.
And they keep milling you. Yes.
But,
and then Sabine's
but
reclamation
internally
for your
you should be
combo
rejoicing.
Pieces. Yeah. Then flash back your milled Sabine's reclamation for your milled combo pieces.
Perfect. I love it. That's great.
Okay.
Well, our next section is cards that have more utility than you think. So these are cards where they obviously do something, but they actually end up doing more than you anticipate.
Yeah, they're cards that we talked about specifically. Now, a lot of these we pulled out. We looked through the top list of cards that are played, right? But when we saw these cards, we thought, oh wow, these cards actually always do way better than we think they're going to.
Yeah, that's the key. Is you're always pleasantly surprised after you play these cards.
Yes, starting with one that Kelton is on a mission to get played more in decks, especially in our budget decks, right? This is one that is a mainstay of our budget brews.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason I'm so passionate about this card is a lot of decks end up hurting for ramp pieces and end up playing very suboptimal ramp pieces if they're not in a color that can ramp well, which is just green.
Yeah, just green, right?
So a lot of times you'll play cards that are suboptimal. And that's okay. Not all ramp needs to be totally optimal. But this one, I think, overperforms from what you would read from the card. This is Ornithopter of Paradise. 2 generic mana. 2 colorless mana. Excuse me. Nope. 2 generic mana.
2 generic
There is
mana.
a difference.
Yeah, there's a difference. Yep.
For an artifact creature Thopter, it is a 0/2 with flying. So this is just Ornithopter. But it has the activated ability tap, add 1 mana of any color.
Yes.
This is amazing. This is a practically an arcane signet with summoning sickness that also can block a flyer later in the game when you don't need the mana anymore.
Right. No, it is, I think, criminally underplayed and something that you should put in your deck before you put in probably some of the diamonds.
Yeah.
Right?
Charcoal diamond. Fire diamond, sky diamond.
Yeah.
Those are all the 2 mana artifacts that enter the battlefield tapped and then tap to add 1 mana of their color. So
of their specific color.
Diamond is black.
This, for all intents and purposes, enters tapped, but lets you tap for any color. So it's fixing you.
Yeah, so the argument against Ornithopter, the reason people would say Ornithopter of Paradise is worse than one of the diamonds, is that it dies to board wipes, or it dies to targeted removal. First off, nobody should be targeting your Ornithopter of Paradise. That's very mean.
Right.
You should not lightning bolt the Ornithopter of Paradise. I mean, maybe you should. You sometimes bolt the Birds of Paradise, but Ornithopter of Paradise probably not going to get removed that early in the game. And then late in the game, if it gets board wiped, so what? You got a ton of value out of it. It's great.
Yeah, the best case scenario is you play this turn 2, and now on turn 3, you have 5 mana to work with, right?
Yeah.
Or 4 mana to mana to work with. Yeah, sorry, 4 mana to work with. But still, that's so good. That is any 2 mana rock, right? Because most of the 2 mana rocks, you're not spending the 1 additional mana anyways. And then, like you said, later in the game, you can
block
even
a
play
flyer
this later in the game and block a flyer. And if you draw this, it's not a dead draw because it's a creature that can block stuff, right?
I've pumped my Ornithopter of Paradise.
Yeah, it can win you the game.
Yeah.
Kill someone with an Ornithopter
No, I have
of
done
Paradise.
a significant amount of damage with an Ornithopter of Paradise before.
I feel like it might have been to me. I feel like I remember this
It probably
happening.
was. I'm pretty sure it's in my Azuri deck, and I'm pretty sure I've put a ton of 1/1 counters on it before.
Yeah, it's... the fact that it's on a creature, I guess, can be a double-edged sword, right? It dies, but also it can... It's
Block,
a creature
attack,
that can do block,
whatever.
attack, do stuff. Yep.
Yeah. This card's great.
Very underplayed. Very underplayed. And our next one is also a creature that I think is underplayed.
And it also ramps you.
And it also ramps you. It is
Sometimes.
Coiling Oracle. Sometimes. But when it doesn't, it's still very good. And that's why we're talking about it. It is Coiling Oracle, which is blue-green, or green-blue, sorry, for a creature Snake Elf Druid. It is a 1/1, and when Coiling Oracle enters the battlefield, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. So we're
you have a
looking at
36% chance. No, you have more. It's more than that. It's
right.
it's about 40%, right? You have a 40% chance of just ramping. The land enters untapped. But you have and then the other 60%, the fail case is you draw a card.
You draw a card.
That's a great fail safe. That's really good. And
the land doesn't enter tapped.
Yeah.
Which is also very relevant, right? That you get to use the mana if you need to.
And now you have a creature that you can chump with.
And you have a creature you can chump with. This is a Sakura Tribe Elder that you can chump with that maybe ramps you, but always replaces itself.
I would still rather play Sakura Tribe Elder first, but then this is the next on the list.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But still very, very good.
Yeah. The next card you may have seen in a game and then seen again and then seen again. And that's because this is Grey Merchant of Asphodel, or affectionately known as Gary. This is 3 black for a 2/4 zombie. When Gary enters the battlefield, each opponent loses X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So as a reminder, devotion is each black symbol in the mana costs of permanents that you control.
Yes. Before we dive into this, I like Gary. I might start calling him Grandma, because I just noticed that the acronym is GMA.
Oh, that's so
GMA.
funny. It is GMA. I love that. That's great.
Anyway, Grandma, Gary, the Grey Merchant, does way better than you think it does, and here's why. When I play Grey Merchant Asphodel in several decks, it's a very good card. I often am very tempted to wait until I have 8, 9 devotion and then slam Gary and then and then everyone loses 11 life and I gain 33 life. And wow, that's such a good play. But Grey Merchant of Asphodel, when you have 2 devotion on board already, makes everyone lose 4 life and you gain 12 life. That's
a 24-point life swing.
That's still a huge swing. And just for some context that I want to add here, I've been brewing some Storm decks. That is the equivalent of casting Tendrils of Agony with a Storm count of 5, which is not easy to do, right?
Yeah.
Tendrils of Agony is 2 black for a sorcery.
Is it only target opponent, though?
It is target opponent. Right.
Yeah.
But exactly. I just searched sorcery. I meant to search Tendrils of Agony. Tendrils of Agony. Target player loses 2 life. You gain 2 life. Storm, right? So Storm, it copies it for each spell you cast before this turn. But that's what I'm saying is you have to have 6 total copies, including the original of Tendrils of Agony, to actually have a 24-point life swing. And Grey Merchant of Asphodel is letting you do that by just having another 2 devotion on board already and then casting this 2/4 that is actually a creature.
This creature is really funny to look at because if you think about when they designed this creature, it was, I believe, introduced in the original Theros block. And it was certainly designed for limited, right? It wasn't designed, Commander wasn't that popular at the time. It was just gaining popularity.
Yes.
And so what they probably thought your devotion would be this was a devotion payoff, right? Yes. So if your devotion was 4 or 6 when this when this hits the battlefield, then they lose 6 life and you gain 6 life. That's a big payoff and for huge. 5 mana. And in Commander, where you have 2 other opponents, this is just wild. You know what I should be playing this in, even though it has pretty much no synergy, is Shieldred. It's a mono black deck, and it's going to be Shieldred is draining people's life throughout the game anyway, so people will be at pretty low life totals. And this is a way to just shut the door on the game with just being well, my devotion's 10, you all lose 10 life.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that you're not already playing that in Shieldred.
I don't think it's in Shieldred because on face value, it doesn't have any additional synergy with the deck. It's just got more utility than you think. That's why it does more than you think it's going to do. It overperforms. That's why it's on the list. That's why I should be probably playing it in Shieldred.
It's very, very good. You should be slamming this, again, earlier than you think as well, because it just gets you value, and hopefully you have ways to get it back out, because it's a way to close out the game.
My joke when I introduced this card was that you've seen it again and again and again and again. And it's because this is a premier, reanimation target, because if you can drain someone multiple times in a turn, then you probably win the game.
Yeah, it's so good. But even, again, that 24 life swing is very, very relevant. Gaining 12 life is crazy, and then also having a creature on board.
Yep.
Our next one is one that overperforms that I've been playing less and less, and I probably should be playing more and more. And there's other decks. There's decks that want it more than others. I will say that. But
it's like the OG colorless ramp all-star, right?
OG colorless ramp all-star that I bought for like $4 or $5. Solemn Simulacrum.
Yeah, that hasn't aged very well, has it?
No, it hasn't. It's gotten printed, but this art is so beautiful. I think this art is so cool on this on the card. It's the card that's most common now, but when I first got it, I thought it was so cool. Solemn Simulacrum is 4 colorless mana. No, sorry, 4 generic mana. I need to stop saying colorless.
I know. Me too.
4 generic mana for an artifact creature golem. When Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. When it dies, you may draw a card. It is a 2/2.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is to compare this to Coiling Oracle.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
It's 2 more mana than Coiling Oracle. It does a similar-ish thing where it ramps you. Later, it draws you the card. It's not ramp or draw a card. It's ramp and draw.
Yeah, it does both things. It's like playing 2 Coiling Oracles.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So I think I'll tell you the reason why I've stopped playing this so much, and it's because I want most of my ramp in the 2 slot.
Sure.
I don't like 4 mana to ramp doesn't feel as good. But 4 mana to ramp and then draw a card is probably pretty good.
Feels pretty solid. So the only deck I put this in recently is a brew I've been doing of an Aristocrats deck.
Yeah.
And in that deck, it's incredibly good because I'm not necessarily concerned about ramping too much, especially early. I'm not ramping to anything. I just am ramping whenever I'm happy to ramp. And in that deck, this probably ramps me, draws me a card, and then draws me a card, right? Or does something else.
Yeah, you need it to die. Like, it does need to die to be good. So, but the reason we put this on the list for cards that overperform, is because I think you and I have both stopped playing this quite a bit. I do have it in one of my decks, and it's something that can copy it and then sacrifice the copy. So it's really quite good. But every time my opponents play this, I'm reminded it's a good card. It comes down on the other side of the table, I'm like, crap. That's actually so good because you just ramped and now I'm going to attack into you. You're just going to chump block with it and you're going to draw cards. So now I don't want to attack you. It just plays so much better than you think. It's so much better than a 4 mana 2/2 looks.
It's so good. And it plays so much. It feels so much like you said, watching an opponent play it feels really good. When you play this yourself, it also feels pretty dang good.
Yeah.
But I think it's in deck building that sometimes I am.
It feels bad in deck building.
It feels bad in deck building.
Yeah,
but it's a very good card, and
there's a reason
we should be playing it more.
Yep.
Another card we should be playing more that performs better than we think it does.
I want to hate this card so bad, and then you explained it in a way where I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. It's a good card.
It's good. But here's the thing: is I don't play it in anything either. Wayfarer's Bauble. Wayfarer's Bauble is 1 generic mana for an artifact, and it has the ability. Pay 2, tap, and sacrifice Wayfarer's Bauble. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This card feels so much worse than a Talisman or Signet.
So much worse. It does. It does feel that way.
But I think I would be running this before some 2 mana rocks, like Thought Vessel, for example. Potentially, but definitely before any 3 mana rocks that aren't utility, like
probably
Curse Mirror.
Like what about Commander Sphere? It's like Commander Sphere is like the 3 mana rock. It taps for any color.
I think I'm playing this before
Commander
Sphere in most decks.
Yeah. So one thing I think we can just agree on out the gate is that land ramp is better than artifact ramp most of the time. So this actually gets you a land. Yes. And that's impressive in a colorless card because usually that's very reserved for green.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's great. So already, like, I think I like this probably better than Commander Sphere in the sense that it's Commander Sphere except for at land ramps instead of just being a rock.
Yeah. The way I was thinking about this actually was, I think it's called Dark Steel Ingot. I think about it kind of like Dark Steel Ingot.
Yeah.
3
mana, add 1 mana of any color, it's indestructible.
It's indestructible, yes. Yeah. This is basically an indestructible mana rock, right? Because you're getting a land. And in casual Commander, lands are virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
Because no one's playing land removal, right? And on top of that, it's 3 mana over the course of 2 turns. If you
Okay, so this is where it's good. And this is where I worry. I'm not sure how I evaluate it. Because if this is in your opening hand, it's so good.
So good.
Because you just don't have that many turn 1 plays, usually. Especially in lower powers, you just don't have that many 1 mana plays.
Yeah.
And so this is a free play on turn 1 because you're not usually sacrificing anything for it. And then it fits, and then it's your 2 mana ramp slot that you want so badly. And it's land ramp. Then it's just ramping growth.
Yes.
So I think it's extremely good in your opening hand. But like you said before, like even late game, it's an artifact. It goes to the graveyard if you care about that. It finds you a land. It thins your deck. Like even late game, it's not necessarily super dead.
I think it's good. I think I'm going to start replacing some 3 mana rocks with this in my decks.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty solid.
I think it's probably pretty good. There's a reason this card's played a lot. As you can see, even us who have played quite a bit of Commander still struggle to understand how much this card overperforms, but it does. It does overperform. It's quite good.
Yeah, I think the idea is that its ceiling is quite good and its floor is better than most 3 mana rocks.
Yeah, its floor isn't bad. But like I said, like I just want it so bad in my opening hand. And then I feel like I get cheated if it's not in my opening hand. But the reality is that that's not the case. Like the floor is actually not that bad.
Yeah, I think it's a solid card. I think it deserves to see more play. Plus, the activation's instant speed. I'm just going to add that at the very end there, too. Is, like,
Sure.
I'd rather draw this than a Talisman late in the game, right? Like, depending on the deck.
Why?
Maybe.
Why? Tell me about that.
Well, it nets you the same amount of mana. It's 1 mana, right?
Okay.
And then you can... If you're playing, like, a controlling deck, you're holding up your mana anyways.
Okay.
You hold up your mana, and then... This actually ramps you for your next turn, and you've only expended 1 mana to do that? I don't know, maybe not. All right, well, maybe not. But I still think it's good. That was a wrong note to end on.
I do think it's good. I think it's awesome. Okay, our final category, I believe, this is our final category. Cards that have more potential than you think. So our last one was cards that overperform. You may read them and be like, it seems...
Seems like the same category, maybe.
Yeah,
but it's not.
I think the difference here is like it's good. It has this place in your deck, and then you're always surprised at how much it pops off.
Yes, these cards. We don't want any hate in the comments. I mean, feel free share your opinion however you'd like. We know these cards are good. Like these cards are very good. To the untrained eye, they may not seem particularly good, and even to the trained eye, they probably do better than you think they are, even if you think they're good already. And the first one here is Blood Artist. This group is 2 cards actually, and it's things that will trigger way more often than you think. Starting with Blood Artist.
Yeah, Blood Artist is 1 and a black for a vampire, a 0/1 vampire, that whenever it or another creature dies. Any creature, not just your creature. Target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it drains for 1. So we talked about Gary. Gary is a drain card. And I think the way to distinguish these 2 groupings is the last one was it has a high floor. And this one is it has an incredibly high ceiling. Where you see the ceiling with Gary. Like you live the dream where you're like, I have 20 devotion and I just kill everybody.
Yes.
But this one, you don't know how high the ceiling is until you play it, and then it just triggers so many more times than you think it will.
Yes, and I would actually argue that this belongs in this category because even the average performance of this is way higher than you think it is.
Yeah, that's true. Like even the floor is a lot higher than you think.
Yeah, so
yeah.
In decks where you are abusing this, it is obviously phenomenally good. If you're sacrificing creatures, you're getting value, you get to drain stuff. Even if this is just like a one-off in your deck because you needed a vampire or whatever, and someone board wipes, you're probably getting 8 to 10 triggers of this, which is
it pays you off for a board wipe. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's a 16 life total swing because someone wiped the board. Unless they cast Farewell or something because they hate you and they hate themselves.
No, this card is just really good. And like you said, super easily abusable, but also just is going to trigger because stuff dies in Commander. And that adds up. The other one that we have in this category, which is a personal favorite of mine, is Displacer Kitten, which is 3 and a blue for a 2/2 cat beast. It has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you exile up to one target non-land permanent you control. Then you return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So once again, I think the floor is very apparent here, where you say, oh yeah, like I can like get ETB abilities a second time whenever I cast something. But the fact that it triggers off of any non-creature spell, it triggers a lot more than you think. And not only that, it can do way more than you think. So one of my favorite things to do is to flicker mana rocks to be able to get additional mana to cast more spells, or something like Coveted Jewel, which is one of my personal favorites, which draws me more cards and gives me more mana to then be able to trigger this again and again and again and again. And not even to mention like Planeswalkers. Right.
You get as many Planeswalker activations as you have mana and non-creature spells.
Yeah.
Like it triggers significantly more than you think and does more than getting ETBs, which I think is the way you typically view it, right? I get an ETB.
Yeah. So, once again, newer players would read this card and be like, why would I want something to enter the battlefield again? Oh, yeah, an ETB. Okay, this is for ETBs. It does so much more than that.
Yes.
Way higher
LTBs.
ceiling. LTBs.
There's lots of reasons to be playing this card. Obviously, again, we understand this is a broken card. We know this is a broken card, but we just want to reiterate that it's more broken even than you think, even if you're not trying to abuse it. It's just very, very good.
Yeah.
The next category. I'm going to introduce this category.
Okay.
Because I know it's near and dear to Kelton's heart, and he's going to be doing a lot of the talking during this one. And this is some other cards that might have more potential than you think. And the first category is fogs. What's a fog, Kelton?
Yeah, so Fog is named after the green card Fog, which for 1 green mana is an instant that says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So there's a fog of war, or actually that's not a good analysis. There's a fog over the battlefield, and none of the creatures deal combat damage. They can't see each other, right? Okay, Fog. Let's just talk about Fog.
Yeah, Fog straight up.
And its friend Darkness, which is the same thing for 1 black mana. I think it's better than you think.
Yes.
I think that it has more utility than you think. I think you can use it when you're attacking if you don't like the way someone has buffed a creature or flashed something in a block or something like that. I think you can use it when someone else is attacking you. I think it's actually just got more potential than you think it does, like the category says. Then there's another category of fogs, and these are ones that are not just good but broken. And I think the two most recognizable and most powerful fog effects that people are going to say, oh yeah, I mean like these cards are broken. We hear about them all the time. The One Ring, which when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. So it's a fog. It doesn't affect your creatures, but it saves you from taking damage. And then Teferi's Protection, which is 2 and a white for an instant until your next turn. Your life total can't change. You gain protection from everything, and all permanents you control phase out. So it's treated as though you don't exist until the next turn.
And you have to exile it because
you do have to exile it. You can't lose it. That'd be really good.
and this is clearly better than a fog because it also saves you from board wipes and from other stuff, but is like the best version of that effect.
Yep.
But there are also like some really solid
there's
actual
some stuff
fogs.
In between. Yeah, there's some stuff in between. One that was popular and then I think has since been underplayed because it was the least exciting of a cycle is Obscuring Haze. Do you want to read Obscuring Haze?
Yes, I did just skim it, and it's better than I thought it was.
It's way better than you think it is.
Yes.
Because if you were to ask, I have a theory that if you were to ask a lot of Commander players what Obscuring Haze does, they would say that it's fog, but for free if you control a commander.
Yes, that's what I would have said, 100%.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that
so
is
go ahead
not
and
what
read
it
it.
is. It is 2 generic mana and a green, so 3 total mana for an instant. If you control a commander is pretty interesting. You control anyone's commander. You may cast...
Oh, yeah, that's funny.
Isn't that kind of cool? You can cast this spell without paying its mana cost. And then it says, prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control.
This is a one-sided fog.
That is way better than I thought it was.
It's way better than you think it is. So the reason this was much less exciting than the other ones in this cycle is because the other ones in this cycle are Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting Swat and Deadly Rollick and Flawless Maneuver.
Yes.
Which are all better. They're just better cards.
Than this.
Better than this. This card is still great, and you should probably still play this card in a lot of green decks. It's just someone attacks you with a bunch of creatures, you make bad blocks, and then you cast this, and it wipes your opponent's creatures out.
Yeah, and you're tapped out, and they're like, I'm swinging at you, swinging everything, and you're like, psych, Obscuring Haze.
Yeah, there's a downside where this gets countered and you lose. Right?
Yes.
There is a blowout potential with this card.
Right.
If you declare bad blocks or you declare no blocks or something like that, and they counter this, that's very bad. But a lot of times, I mean, you're just going to get a few free kills off of this, and that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, can I tell you something that actually is also relevant with this? And I think it is a little bit of a silver bullet, which is not a reason to play it. But it just says prevent all damage, not even combat damage.
Oh,
So if there's any way that someone's like trying to combo off with like Walking Ballista or whatever to deal damage, this like kills it.
Stops that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It does save your opponents too, because it's prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So if your opponents are attacking other people too,
it stops someone from winning.
Yeah. So once again, I think it's quite good. I think it's good because it's free. I don't think you'd want to pay 2 green mana for this effect. There's just too much blowout potential, but for free, like you may risk it, right?
What about 2 green mana for a similar but better effect? For the most part.
One of my pet cards, Arachnogenesis. So this is an instant 2 green. Create X 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Then prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-spider creatures.
Incredibly good card, and passes one of my litmus tests that I've recently thought of, like yesterday when we were looking through this card. But
the tried and true litmus test.
The tried and true litmus test of a card that is good. And it is that this card used to be $50 and is now like $3 because it's had a reprint. Now, that's not always the case, but I think is a pretty decent litmus test for, is this card in demand and
that was
good?
Savine's Reclamation. Savine's Reclamation was like $10 and is now less than $1.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Good cards generally cost more. That's not always true. It's not a 1-to-1, but
I would say good cards from modern Magic history.
Yes.
That is a good way to indicate.
Yes,
hey, there might be something going on here.
Yeah. For sure.
In any case, there's another very similar effect to Arachnogenesis. Do you want to read Galadrim Ambush?
Yes, Galadrim Ambush. I think here it is. Galadrim Ambush is 3 green, so 1 more, which is why I'm always surprised when Arachnogenesis is 2 green.
Yeah.
For an instant, and it says create X 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn by non-elf creatures. So, admittedly, a significantly more relevant creature type, which is probably why it costs 1 more.
Yeah, so if we look at this and compare it to Arachnogenesis and Obscuring Haze allows all of your creatures to deal damage still, but not your opponents. Arachnogenesis only allows spiders, which a lot of the times you're probably not going to have very many other spiders. Spider typal decks are just not super abundant. Elf typal decks, however, are very abundant and produce a lot of mana.
Yes.
So you're likely also going to be able to block with your other elf creatures and deal damage with those. So it is quite good.
Yep. It's incredibly good. I lost a game recently because I didn't hold up mana for this because I thought I alpha striked correctly and left someone with 1 life. But if I had left up mana for this, it would have been absolutely absurd. Like, it's just phenomenally good. And a fog that I would gladly play. I don't know about fog and darkness, but a fog that I would gladly play in the right deck.
Well, let me tell you a fog that you would be even more glad to play. That's because it's the best version of this effect. This is Ink Shield, and it's 3 white black for an instant. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. So it's you don't want to block because your creatures are still going to die. But for each 1 damage prevented this way, create a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Mostly just ends the game. If someone attacks you for 10 damage, you play this, you make 20 damage worth of flying creatures.
Yeah. No, that's really
that on
good.
Your turn you can then attack with.
Yeah, this is a card that neither of us have played. But also past
I've played it once because I do have the precon.
Oh, that's right.
That this came in, and I've just played the precon, and I've enjoyed that precon a lot. And what's fun is that precon. So fun fact: this was recently printed in the Sheldon Menery commemorative Secret Lair, and that's because this card and that Strixhaven deck was a card in a deck that Sheldon Menery helped design.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he had a famous deck that had a bunch of kind of these effects. I think the name of the deck was like "You've Done This to Yourself" or something like that. And it was one of his like pet decks that he played a lot. So he helped design the Strixhaven deck that did this.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very, very cool. Yeah, this card is incredibly good. Kelson has played it. I have never played it. But I see how good it is. You have to hold up 5 mana. So you have to hold up 5 mana and hope you get attacked, right? Is kind of the
Sure.
the deal
you kind of see it coming.
Sure.
Right? Like if someone is amassing a giant board of attackers, then you can kind of see the attack coming. So I don't think it's that dead of a card. I think the reason you wouldn't play this is because of how powerful it is. Like to some effect, like it's like, okay, I win the game next turn. Or at least I take out a player next turn.
Yeah, you swung out, and now I win the game because you dealt 40 damage and I have 42 twos that can attack.
You dealt, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. I think the challenge with this card, outside of deciding whether or not you want to play it based on power level, is hiding the smirk on your face when you have it in hand and knowing that someone's going to attack.
And then someone declares 40 damage worth of attackers. And you're just bouncing in your
seat.
seat.
Having to pass turn with 5 mana and go like, man, I guess you got me. And then Ink Shield when they swing.
So funny.
It's a very good card.
Anyway, fogs have more potential than you think. One last card in this category. It's a favorite of both of ours. Do you want to go ahead and read it for us?
Yes, this is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. How funny would it have been if I just switched it up on you and read something entirely different?
And it'd be like, oh, we're going off script.
A favorite of ours. This is Dan. This is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. It is 1 black for a legendary creature nightmare that has 3 power, 3 toughness. And it says, at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life, and you draw a card. Let us step back in time about 45 minutes to us talking about another card that we don't play very much, and it is Phyrexian Arena. And let's talk about why we're playing this over Phyrexian Arena for the most part. And that is because it is the same mana cost. This is a 3/3 body.
Yep.
And you don't even need to sacrifice anything else. You can just sacrifice Braze to herself, and you will likely draw 3 cards, and each opponent loses 2 life.
Yeah.
And for Phyrexian Arena to catch up with that, first of all, play Phyrexian Arena. It's a very good card. But for Phyrexian Arena to catch up, it takes 3 entire turn cycles.
Yeah.
And if you don't sacrifice Braids to herself, you can sacrifice something else, and now you're doing this every turn.
Yeah. So this card is obviously extremely good in a deck that can create a lot of tokens and just has fodder. It's also extremely good if you're first in turn order. Because by turn... So if you're first in turn order, in everyone's turn 2, people likely haven't played creatures that they're willing to sacrifice or that would be good for them to sacrifice. And so you just play this on turn 3, sacrifice her to herself, and then you draw 3 cards and everyone loses 2 life. And 3 mana, draw 3 cards, each opponent loses 2 life. Wow, that's a great card. Like, you would just play that as a sorcery. And this is a body that has higher upside than that because you can also just start sacrificing tokens and things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say even if you're not first in turn order, the chances of someone having played a creature that they actually want to sacrifice by turn 3 is incredibly low. Like, if it's a mana dork, they're like, no, like, this is my ramp.
Totally. Yeah. It's just better if you're first in turn order.
It is just better. It's objectively way better. But also, being first in turn order is just better all the time.
Sure. Yes, it is.
Okay, so this brings us to our conclusion. Our thesis for today is a lot of these cards have more potential than you think. Well, we'll start from the beginning. Pay life for stuff, it's worth it. Give people things, it's worth it. And a lot of these cards are just better than you think they are, and you should be playing them. And we should be too. I am putting Wayfarer's Bauble in decks starting now.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for listening. We hope that this has been helpful for you. We felt so much support. Please continue to like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. We are always posting weekly Commander content, so join us next week. We'll have a brand new topic for you. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and whenever you get your podcasts. You can also reach out to us on thecommanderpod.com. We have a website that has a way to get in touch with us if there's anything you want to say to us that you don't want to say in the comments. So keep playing Commander. We hope to see you next week, and until next time, remember to always pay the water.